Hey friends, glad to be back today. And if you caught the last video last week with Michael and myself, we were talking about steps 1 and 2, the 12-step program. Michael, real quick, can we go over steps 1 and 2 quickly before we get into step 3?
Yeah, and thank you for having me back. Steps 1 and 2. Step 1 is that we admit we're powerless over alcohol or drugs and that our life had become completely unmanageable. It's the step of getting honest. Step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourself could restore us to sanity. So once again, the first 2 steps, I get to read these and it tells me that I have a disease. That's steps 1 and 2.
Okay. So those 2 steps seem obviously the foundation for the 12-step program and 12 steps, as well as I can say it, as well as AA. Let's talk now about the 3rd step. And I've read it several times, outlined it, highlighted it, and I think it's a very interesting step because this to me seems to be, I would say, the bedrock of the way that I believe I live my life in a spiritual belief. And I believe that this is the beginning of the empowerment of the spiritual belief within the person that is going through the 12 steps. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yes. I call it the heartbeat of the 12 steps. It's made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understand Him. All right. This is the first step of the 12 steps that mentions, I call it the G word or the G thing, and that's God. And as someone that's coming out of addiction or out of alcoholism, and when I heard the word God, I wanted to run away, because through different organizations, religions, churches, it made me feel like I was wrong, they were right. And so my perception of God and growing up and the leaders around me and my perception of God was a skewed perception, So when someone mentioned God, it was an authoritarian person, and it was rules and it was all this stuff, and I didn't want any part of it. So step 3 was the life-changing step in my life today. It's a step of surrender for me. It's a step of acceptance for me, and that is doing exactly what God wants me to do. And it also, I get to create my relationship with God. Okay, I believe there's one God, but I also really believe, and it tells me He treats me differently than He treats you. We all have different thresholds, and I understand that now through just being introduced to the 3rd step.
I think this is very interesting because when I was reading it, what I've realized is that oftentimes in life when we haven't found the G thing, when we haven't found God, when we haven't found spirituality, we're not professing religion here. We're talking about spirituality, the oneness, the thing that's bigger than all of us. Until you've found that in life, we feel like we have all this power. And we feel like we're in control of everything, but we're really powerless.
Right.
And this to me is what the 3rd step is saying, is that, until you finally get it, and you might hit rock bottom several times and realize finally, that's when this will be profound.
Right. Well, and it is. It's step 3 for me, and once again, it's my personal experience with it, is that I completely turned it over to God. All right. That's real easy to say. And I've always heard people say that, but there was a lot of fear that, what do you mean turn it over to God? Well, before we turn it over to God, I get to create my God, all right? Now, for a lot of the Christian believers, which I am, they're like, Michael, there's one God. There's Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and the only way to heaven, and that's a whole, I believe that. I'm in agreement with that, okay? But I get to create my God, and I'll never forget, I was attending Betty Ford, one of the very first long-term treatment center that I went to. And the reason why I say Betty Ford is because from Betty Ford all the way to the penitentiary, they taught me the same thing. That was the 12 steps. Trust God, help, clean house, help others. So it just pinpoints that I have to self-diagnose myself that I'm sick in order for this deal to work. It doesn't matter where I'm at, who I'm talking to. Once I do that and I make that decision, now I can heal and grow. But so what does this look like? I had a counselor one time, and he said, who is God? What does God look like? What does he do? I mean, how does all this work? I mean, you're telling me, Ashley, you're telling me, and the people in the program are telling me that, okay, I'm going to quit drinking and doing drugs, all right? I'm going to come to believe that there's a power greater than myself to restore me to sanity. And you're telling me that I need to believe in something that I can't hear, see, smell, touch. You're telling me to do that after years of drug and alcohol abuse. Do you know how much? Do you know how big a risk that is to do? You know how much faith, that little bitty of faith it takes to step out there and do that? I started in the program in 1994, and I did not do step 3 correctly until 5/29/2017. 2017. It took that long for me to make a decision, not think about it, not just teeter-totter. That's made a decision to turn my will, all my willpower, and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. So who's this God? This God is that my counselor said, Michael, you love your boys so much. You talk about them all the time. And I said, absolutely. If your boys were to spit in your face, cuss you out, and run out the door, and you never saw them again for 30 plus years, and then one day there was a knock on the door and you opened the door, would you let them in the house? Mm-hmm. I said, absolutely. Would you ask them questions? Not one. I would just say, come on in. I wouldn't care what they look like, I wouldn't care, just come in. He said, you just described your God.
Total unconditional love.
Yes.
And that's the thing that we have to find, and that's something that I talk to with my clients, is that until we find unconditional love and feel it and find it for ourselves, and we have to find it very deep within, because the first thing that all of us do is what? We have, not all of us, but most of us have a tendency of what? Underestimating ourselves, looking down upon ourselves, judging ourselves, being the harshest, worst critic on ourselves. Anything that we do wrong is bad, and we define that as bad. We put ourselves down. We make ourselves feel bad. And so until we figure that out, that unconditional love component for ourselves, we can't do it for others.
Right.
And we have to see the God within us to be able to begin to do that.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. And you know, step three is once you make that decision, then you just enjoy the ride. Because see, for every time that I would get released and get out of being incarcerated, I'd go right back to what I was doing. I'd put God on the shelf, and he'd say, okay, I'll be on the shelf. And he was always there when I'd come knocking back at the door. So the difference this time, what's different this time, is that I'm willing to do whatever God tells me to do. All right? And so I'm doing that today. This is what God wants me to do, is to share my experience, strength, and hope. This is not even close to what I drew up my life to be. Also, in the program, you'll see a lot of people is like, give it to God. Have you ever heard that? When people say, hey, just give it to God, okay? Well, what that means is complete acceptance. So, for example, I've got some friends out there that, you know, someone's talking bad about you, or putting you on blast, and, you know, and it's really hurting you. Mm-hmm. And we want to, and this book that you're reading, the big book, is we cease fighting everyone and everything. We give them to God. We give them to God. And you know what's interesting is the people who are talking about us, especially in my case, the common denominator is they're untreated alcoholic drug addicts. They're still out in the disease. Mm-hmm. And guess what? It's my job to help those people. And the greatest thing I can do is give them to God, and I keep doing me, as opposed to trying to play God. Because when I play God, my God gets real small. He backs up out of the way.
Yeah, and that's the biggest key in our life too, is there's going to be folks that you're dealing with, whether you're going through, you know, sobriety, whether you're working on yourself. You know, you can actually look at the 12 steps, and this can work with toxic relationships,
yes,
with toxic marriages, with abusive attitudes, abusive marriages, any sort of thing like that, even the own self-abuse that we do. This really works, because as I've been reading that, this is the stuff that I live my life by. Mm-hmm. And it's really neat, because I'm really happy that Michael's is going to give me a copy of the 12 steps, because I'm really going to start really focusing on how much my life mimics this.
Awesome.
And it's really, really neat. So let me ask a question real quick. So, a lot of times people think that they can do it on their own. And I think that's something you see when people go back and forth through treatment centers, because they say that there's a lower percentage of success rates when it comes to rehab facilities. And I don't want to go into the exact percentage, but it's pretty low. Do you think that that's because most people haven't gotten to step 3, haven't found God in their own life, and they're just kind of going through the motions to try to get out of there as fast as they can?
That's my experience. I mean, that's me. I mean, I would do step 1, 2, and 12.
Okay.
Step 1 and 2. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I own it, And then step 2, yeah, I believe that there's a power out there greater than myself to restore me to sanity. Okay, Michael, are you willing to change your entire life and give your whole life to God? And if He wants you to go prune trees for the rest of your life, will you do that to stay sober? Not yet. Okay? And then I want to go to step 12, and I want to go tell the whole world how to live life in recovery and how to do it. And the problem is that I haven't worked steps 3 through 11 to clean house. All right? So what we say in the program is, when Michael is left to his own devices,
Okay.
I will fail. All right? I say this all, my step 3 awakening was when I was locked up. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was sick and tired of the same pattern. I was sick and tired of living in jail. And it was time where I finally truly surrendered, and I told God, you can have all of me. All of me. All of me. I don't care about the world or anything around me. I will do whatever you have me to do. If it's to stay in prison the rest of my life, I'll do it. I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. Because in the 12 steps, the only time that alcohol or drugs or overeating or overspending or overexercising or pornography, the only time it's ever mentioned is step 1. Steps 2 through 12 is 2, 3 is trusting God. Because before I get to step 4, which we're going to do in the next show, I've better made this decision. Because I've got to go into the rest of the steps and the rest of my life with God being number 1 in my life.
It's worked for me. I think that all of us can have a tendency or have an ability to be addicted personality, to have an addiction to something, whether that's food, alcohol, drugs, prescription medication, toxic people, toxic relationships, toxic sexual relationships, whatever that looks like. And I feel like not until you finally realize the value of your life and how important it is, and also that it's not really all about you. And and it's interesting because when I was reading this, it says, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And it talks about, it is a disease. And I get it. It's a disease. You're not at ease. And I get that. And the thing is interesting is that, yes, I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm going to tell you something that's very interesting. My desire to drink is not very much at all, because when I do have a drink, it's like I feel like I'm getting off task with where I need to be at. I feel like I'm numbing myself away from who my identity truly is. Yeah. And it's a very interesting thing. And when you go out in public, from my perspective, and you see all these people drinking, so like you go to an event and you see people drinking, and I'm not judging anybody at all. That is not what I'm doing. But it's interesting to watch and to understand, and even put your feet in their shoes and understand where they're coming from and what their perspective is. And what I've been at lately in the last few years and for a long time is just, what is best for me? What can I do my best journey? How can I live my best journey of life? Because this is our one life to live, right? How can I best show God, and how can I best show the world when nobody's looking who I truly am?
Right. And that's a great point, because the 12 steps, it does that. It tells us to trust Him. It tells us to clean house and take a personal inventory daily. Make amends when we need to. We make amends immediately. Mm-hmm. We continue to take personal inventory for me, an hourly basis, and to admit my faults when I was wrong. And then step 12 is we share the message. And that's what, like I said, that's what I'm doing here is the 12th step. I'm doing this. This is the selfish part of the program. I'm doing this for me to stay clean and sober today. All right. Mm-hmm. The God deal. The God deal is. Here's a great example. when I went to an event with you just recently, there was drinking there. It's the first event that I've ever been to in my entire life that I did not see the drink. I didn't even see it. I've never felt that in my life. And I was thinking about that when we were driving, and I go, I finally went to an event where the event was more important than the drink. I've never done that. And then I went to an event the 2 nights later, okay? And the exact same thing happened. And what it was is I had God was there with me, all right? And it wasn't an effort, and it was all about the event and how I could be of service to the people at the event and be of service of others, as opposed to sitting there, we call it white knuckling and going, okay, I just got to act like I'm sober. And I'm thinking that mental obsession, okay? Why can't I drink like him? Why can't I drink like her? And then the disease kicks in and it starts saying, well, you can. You can. And what happens is the disease goes here and God goes here. And God loves me so much, once again, he lets me go, because God's like this, arms wide open. He's always there to receive me. To receive me. I just have to ask him. And like I said, this is step 3, because I am talking, Ashley, I've never talked like this in my entire life. This is not me. This is a God of my understanding who is love. And he wants me to love everyone and to serve him. And that's what it's all about. Step 3 of the God deal, it's not about church. It's about God. It's not about religion. It's about spirituality.
And I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, once somebody honestly and altruistically and truly in all ways accepts step 3, they're really on a path to recovery.
Oh my gosh, it's the heartbeat. You know, when Dr. Silkworth to Bill Wilson, when he told him to change his pitch, because Bill Wilson, when he had the bright light experience, that was step 3, all right? He made a decision to turn his will and life over to the care of God. And he went out of that in sanitarium, and he was pulling drunks out of the house. We talked about this before, right? And that's when Dr. William Silkworth said, hey, change your pitch. And steps 1 and 2 is we get to talk about the disease. Okay, I have a disease. Now that we admit that we have the disease and the door's slightly open, here's what we're going to do. The only person that can solve and cure this spiritual stronghold, this disease, okay, is God, all right? And that's the way it is. My God's Jesus Christ. It works for me, okay? Some people will pick different gods, all right? That's great, all right? But you'll eventually, true sobriety, in my humble opinion, is through one God. We serve one God, and that's going to create conflict, and that's okay. That's okay. But as long as we don't drink or drug, because for me, I'm just sharing my God and my personal experience, strength, and hope, is because for the first time I'm happy, joyous, and free. I'm in the now. Step 3 gets me in the now, gets me living right here, right now. Because if I start thinking about tomorrow and I get anxious, that's not step 3. Okay, I haven't made that decision. Okay, and I don't do step 3 perfect all day long, but in recovery, if I start feeling a certain way, I know that God's not number 1 at that time, and I have to give it to him. Acceptance, even if I don't want it. There's times, once again, if somebody's saying something about me, or I'm in fear. If I'm in fear, I have an opportunity to do step 3 or go drink or drug. That's where I'll end up, one or the other.
And I think a lot of us have that opportunity no matter what. If you're in step 3, if you're not in step 3, in your general life, if somebody is talking about you, are you going to go and get onto their level, good or bad? Are you going to talk about them and start into the gossip train? Are you going to do that? Or are you going to refocus your energy and say, you know what, I can't change anybody. I can pray about it. One thing that I've worked on is when people do me wrong, your first response is you want to go track them down and tell them how wrong they've done you. But I've realized the best thing to do, and it's the hardest thing to do, is to just pray that the situation works out, to send prayers and love that way. And what I found out in life, everything is a cycle, right? So everything's cyclical. And so when something happens, even if somebody tells something about you that's not true, and they tell, let's say, 2 or 3 people, and instead of you going on and reacting, you kind of send prayers that way, send unconditional love, whether it takes a month or a year, eventually for that truth to come out, eventually when it does come out, it is going to come out.
Right.
And I had that happen a few years ago, and it was interesting because something was said, and it was so false, it was unbelievable. But it took a while, but when it did come out, it's funny how it was just the perfect timing, and everybody that was there that needed to hear it was there,
Right.
and it had nothing to do with me. I just
Right.
happened to be standing there.
Right.
And it was perfectly timed because it was in God's time. It wasn't about me saying, I'm so tired of this, I can't deal with this, I want this rectified right now. And instead of dealing with that, I said, you know what? I'm going to let this go because my desire to change things and my desire to control things is not going to work anyway.
Right. Right. Left to my own devices, I will fail. I got to invite God right in the middle of everything. I have the people in the program, people in recovery, godly, spiritual men and women in my life, all right, have told me we cease fighting everyone and everything. We don't pick up the sword, okay? We give it to God because this is His deal. If I can't handle it, if a fear comes in or something comes in, I say, listen, you go talk to God. You go talk to Big Daddy. You go talk to the G thing, because that's all. Because if I tried to do it, okay, now God's going to put it on my heart. That's the difference between this guilt and shame. Now if I'm guilty of something, there's a step for that, and we'll get there. We're not there yet. We're not there to apologizing to people yet. We're not there yet. But I need to go make this right with this person. They don't like. We're not there yet. We're on step 3. Okay, we need to get you to make a decision to have God run your life and not you run your life, not M2 run your life. Well, I'll do that, but I need to go. No, we're on step 3. And that's what I did my whole life. I would never do step 3.
What do you think? Was there some sort of, was it the control factor? What was it that kept you from wanting to get into step 3? What
One word.
was that?
Fear.
Fear.
Fear the unknown. You're telling me to go worship Winnie the Pooh or Casper the Friendly Ghost. No. No. This is a dog-eat-dog world, baby. I'm a do me. I'm going to go do my deal. Yeah, look out for number 1. I'm going to go, I've got to control my life. No one's going to control me. All right? All these things that we hear, which I didn't understand it. You're telling me to not worry about this person dying of cancer, and you're telling me to just give them to God? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you to do. You're telling me that I'm in jail right now, and in order for me to feel better and do easy time, you're telling me just to give it to God? That's exactly what I'm telling you to do.
Oh, and I like that. The give it to God thing, one thing too that I think is a good caveat is you hear that and it's hard to understand that sometimes. And what my interpretation is this: you got to keep doing all the work. Okay, you got to keep doing everything. Every day you wake up and you do your responsibilities. Yeah. Every day you got to take care, you got to clean house. Every single day you got to dot the I's and cross the T's. When you give it to God, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm done.
I got a good story on that.
It doesn't mean, oh, hey, God's going to take care of this and I'm not going to do nothing. It's more like this: I'm going to give to God what's going to happen. I'm going to let God have this so I don't have a bunch of expectations. I'm going to give this to God so I'm not always thinking about the future or the past. What I'm going to do when I give it to God is I'm going to say, hey, God, this is this right here. But every single minute of every single day, I'm going to work to better myself and to be in the position to do what I need to do. And I'm giving you this big enchilada to deal with, but I'm not letting go of my responsibilities. Actually, quite the contrary. I'm going to do all the responsibilities and do all the work, but the fear factor and the questioning and the wondering and the expectations and the defining, I'm going to hand you, because guess what? I don't know that stuff anyway.
Right. There's so many great stories. Step 3. I love step 3 now. I didn't even hate it. I just didn't even look at it. But I heard Dr. Tony Evans, I listen to him all the time, and he was sharing, and it's in the Bible, that, and I do things on video on Facebook Live like no tripping Thursday, and no wigging Wednesday. We ain't wigging on Wednesday. We ain't tripping on Thursdays. And And what that is what I'm saying is that when I'm worrying, I'm telling God he doesn't know what he's doing. That's strong. Okay? If I'm worrying about something, I'm saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. Give me the steering wheel back. And you know what he said? Go ahead, M2. Go do you. We know how this is going to end up. All right? And that gets back into step 2 of the insanity. But back into step 3 is that what he talks about is and it talks about doing the footwork. I got to do the footwork. But I follow my feet the way God wants me to go. God doesn't want me to be a home builder anymore. He doesn't want me to be in real estate anymore. I'm following my feet doing this, all right? God has a destiny for everyone out there, but we have to listen to him and what he wants us to do, because you're going to mind somebody. You're going to mind somebody. But the birds, when they wake up in the morning, they chirp and they're happy. This is Dr. Tony Evans, and they're just chirping and they're happy, and because they know they're going to get a worm. But they fly around and look for worms, but they know they're going to get a worm because Daddy's going to provide the worm. God's going to provide the worm. They're not just going to wake up and open their mouth and it just comes out of the sky. They got to go look for the worm. But then they're not tripping. They don't have 401ks. They don't have bank accounts. They've made the decision to turn their will and life over to the care of God as they understand them, but they follow their wings and they know that Daddy's going to feed them. They know it. They know God's going to feed them. And that's a great example of step 3.
And that's profound.
Yeah.
And I feel like anybody watching this video right now, no matter if you're dealing with a family member that might be addicted, or a family member that's just become sober, or you yourself are addicted and thinking about getting some treatment or trying to figure out what the next step is, I think realizing that we have to let go of the stress because we can't control it anyway.
Right.
And that fear is all false evidence appearing real.
That's right. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And once again, I'm addicted to sin. Okay? When my eyes are open, I'm in full-blown relapse. And what that means is that I want to do good, like Paul says in the Bible, I want to do good, but my flesh does bad. And what that means for me is that, and that's the great thing about today in recovery, is once I made that decision, and step 3 is I don't live the life, Ashley, like I used to, of when I was comfortable, I was uncomfortable. And when I was uncomfortable, I was uncomfortable. What a horrible life that was. And so the disease would feed on itself, all right? Step 3, I don't feel that way today. I do not feel that way today. But it's work. I work it every single day. I work it every day. I stay away from triggers. I stay away from the ego, pride, grandiosity, and wanting to go out there and go build an empire. And nothing wrong with that. My character defects, which we'll talk about later in the steps, all right? When we get to step 4 tells us why I do the things I do. I can finally answer the question. Once I do step 3 and I'm willing, I can finally sit down with my therapist or my sponsor and put it on paper and I go, this is why I do the things I do. This is why I do it. I can't do that unless I do step 3. That's why they're in order for a reason.
I can't wait for step 4.
Yeah.
So lasting thoughts for our viewers today?
Well, I tell you, take some risk, okay? I took a lot of risk by chemicals and alcohol, relationships. I took a lot of risk to try to change the way I felt. Lying, stealing, manipulating, criminal activities. I took a lot of risk to do that. Take some risk and make a decision to turn your will and life over to the care of God, because God is He's the only answer. Take it from me. And I can't believe I'm talking this way. I just can't believe I'm talking this way.
That's awesome. Taking the risk. And one thought too, for all y'all watching, something that you might want to do, and it's just an idea and a concept. There's a thing called a God box. So if you're dealing with some stuff in life right now that's overwhelming and you don't know what to do with it, creating or making a box, and you call it your God box, whether you go find a box. My particular God box is a it's a hand carved box. It's a wood little box, and it's got the tree of life on the top of it. And I have 2 pieces of paper in there right now for 2 things that I'm dealing with in my life, and I put them and I've given it up to God. Now, have I let them go and done nothing to it? No, every single day I'm working to make that a reality. But I've said, God, hey, I need some help here. It's not about me. I'm going to keep working and doing all this stuff, and I'm going to keep doing the best I can, but I'm leaving you up to this because I know you have the grand plan. I'm going to let you do that grand plan. And you know what? I might think it should happen this way, or it should come about this way, or it should happen now, or it should happen yesterday. I'm not going to think about that anymore. I'm going to keep doing the work like I said I was. I'm going to leave you with the grand plan.
That's awesome. That's step 11.
Really?
Sought through prayer and meditation.
Wow.
That's step 11. Step 11. That's awesome. That's step 11. But once again, and that's so cool what you just said, because that's a result of the steps before. And once again, for people who are listening, and a lot of people listening for your loved ones, and I don't mean to go on and on, but
no, you're good.
I love step 3. All right. This program was a trick for me. Recovery programs, it was a trick, and it was a trick to get me to God. And it worked. It worked. And it took a lot of pain and a lot of people around me. I put a lot of people through pain. And the only gift I can give to them is by working these steps, doing the next right thing, and giving back. That's my amends to the world, is giving back.
Well, you're doing a good job so far.
Oh, thanks.
Keep it up.
I will. I will. I don't want to be. I like walking over here instead of walking to the chow line.
Yeah, that's all I could too.
Yeah.
And I like you walking over here too.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate everything, Michael. I'm looking forward to having Michael on next week to discuss step 4.
Man, as a vet, step 4 is for a lot of people. That's the relapse step.
Okay.
The program is and you talked about treatment centers and all that. And treatment centers are great. They educated me on the disease, and I got to detox and all that. And I heard Tim Ryan talking this morning a little bit, and he made a good point. You know, treatment centers are good, but there is a program of recovery, and that's the 12 steps that how we live life for the rest of our life. But step 4 is our inventory, and that's where we put on paper of all the things that we are resentful for, fear, anger, and also our assets. Let me talk about that, what we're good at. We also get to put on paper what we're good at. This is the step that you always hear everybody, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, all that stuff. Here's my belief on that based on my experience. My step 4 was extremely easy. The reason why it was easy is because that shows me I did step 3 correctly. If I don't do step 3 correctly, the rest of the steps are difficult because I've made a decision.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot to talk about in the next videos. And so stay tuned. We have more where this came from. And don't forget, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends and family about this, because I'm sure that somebody needs to hear this information. Even if you think they want to or not, it's really, really important. As well as, if you like the video, please click the like button and comment on this video as well, because this is about communication and conversation. This is a judgment-free zone. This is a safe place where people that actually want to be better and want to have a happier, healthier life can be, and can learn from other people, and can comment and can support each other, but as well as we can learn from you. I can learn from your comments, and anything that you'd like us to talk about as well, I will commit into a new video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless everybody.
God bless y'all. In the meantime, don't forget, live your true life.